everyone to the August 4th, 2022 edition of CED Office Hour Live. Our topic for today will be the expansion of urban farms in Ohio. And Mama Omape Carter Dabuku will be our guest speaker. She's affectionately known as Mama O. But before we get to that, I always like to start off our shows with the definition of what community and economic development is, because it's always it's such a vast um, topic and there's many dimensions to it. It's interdisciplinary and it touches on everything like diversity. And so you'll hear pieces of it, but we like to kind of give you our approach and how we work in that CED space. So community and economic development looks at how we live, work, play, thrive, and how we navigate through all those spaces and how we are interconnected in all those spaces. So it deals with affordable housing, highways, physical planning of public spaces, construction, that's the infrastructure, right? And then on the opposite end is the human capital development. So youth employment, workforce development, working with quality of life issues, so a little bit of social services, healthcare, all of that is at the other end. And then what I consider the connector between the two are the organizations and businesses that connect both ends, right? And that's where we live, work, and play. And as community economic development professionals, we look at that whole system. And then we say, based on our space within the CED spectrum and our bandwidth and our expertise, how can we improve, plug in, play, improve on a part of that CED spectrum. So here at the university, at Central State University Extension, right now our CED team tends to focus on business development, organizational development, community resiliency, workforce development, and quality of life. So within like GED programming, prepping for if you're going into choosing to go into the military, the prepping for that standardized test that you have to take. We do record sealing clinics. And we also have the ability, if our existing programming doesn't fit your needs, then we work with you as an individual or group or organization to develop an initiative, a strategy, or program to meet those needs. So those are kind of just our core programming and focus areas, but we really can expand outside of that. And here today on our team, in addition to me, is Eric Smith. He is based in the northwest portion of Ohio. I'm based in the southern portion of Ohio. Crystal Duckett is the Regional Extension Associate here with me in the southern region. However, even though the bulk of our time is in our region, we really serve the entire state with our programming and outreach efforts. So that's just a quick snapshot of who we are on the CED team. And like I said, today we are I'm going to turn the mic over to Mama O. She is a very dynamic person. I met her when I first came to Extension about a year and a half ago, and she's been stuck with me ever since. I call her for ideas. I love coming up there and to the Edgemont Solar Garden. Every time I go, I'm learning something new. So, with CED, it's not about us dictating. It's a two-way street with education, right? I'm learning from Mama O, she's learning from me, and it's all to make whatever we're working on better. So we work with everybody. We're not dictators. We're not, you all are the community and the businesses dictate kind of how you need us, and then that's how we serve, right? So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mama O and start off. Can you just kind of give us an overview of how you even got to the solar garden? Because you have so many experiences, but all of those experiences really help to make the Edgemont Solar Gardens and your other initiatives that you're working on so dynamic and impactful? So let's start with the foundation
Oh,
and go
thank
from
you.
there.
You know, somebody said to me, I hear you're an artist. What's your art form? And I said, living. And they looked at me kind of funny and they said, well, if I was asked you to do something for me, what would you do? I said, I would ask you, what do you need? So that's the kind of life I live. I grew up, as many people who know me, I grew up in what I call southern Ohio. You can't get any more southern than Ironton except South Point. So I
Yep.
grew up squeezed between West Virginia and Kentucky. Both my family lineages came to Ohio in the 1920s as part of what's called the Great Migration. Both sides were agriculturalists, but my father's family did cash crop. My mother's family had their own farm, fed themselves, and ironically, well, in Virginia, cash crop was tobacco. In Georgia, the cash crop was cotton. And so it was land theft and jealousy and the Klan that helped my mother's family leave Rome, Georgia, and head for Chattanooga and eventually to Ironton, Ohio. And so I grew up with people who understood the power of having control over your own food. When I was growing up in Ironton, raising animals were still allowed in the city limits. So it was common to go down to Man's Market and get a chicken, and they would ask you dressed or undressed. And I knew that didn't mean a suit coat. You know, it meant feathers or no feathers. And so I never had the privilege of killing chickens, but I used to watch them run around in my grandpa's backyard on Friday and then watch them swimming in the stew pot on Sunday. So I grew up with food on the hoof and in the ground. My mother is the youngest of seven. Her mother was born before the turn of the 20th century. So I got Victorian skills in canning and food preservation. I know what slaughtering looks like. I can take a pig down if I have to. I scale and gut my own fish. So you can take me fishing with you, Eric. So that's my background. I came to Dayton after 30 years in Cincinnati, where I worked as an education specialist in Head Start and Montessori Ed, and then grew as a storyteller, actor, performance artist, had my children, and began to travel. One of my interesting experiences about travel were being able, when I went to Nigeria and to Senegal, being able to see the same types of foods there that I ate in Appalachia and began to think about African American heritage foods in the diaspora. So that was one experience. But my deeper experience came through okra. You know, okra is magical. It makes everything taste better, even eggs. So I went to Turkey in 2008. The first night I was there, I was taken to a little street stall, and in the back there was something hanging crisscross, spears crisscross on a string. And I asked the lady, "What is that?" And she said, "It's okra." And my cheeks got all tight with the smile. And I said, "How do you cook it?" And what she described was the very dish I had eaten the night before I went to Turkey. Okra fried with tomatoes, but in our version, which has corn in it, is our nod to our indigenous heritage here in the Americas. And so it was then that I understood that there was something uniquely special about my relationship with food and growing food. But it really didn't become clear to me till I moved to Dayton and I was told I would work on food issues. And I thought that meant I was going to lose weight. But during the pandemic, people give the quarantine and this COVID pandemic credit or give it acknowledgement for having created all these emotional and shifts around employment and how people are going to invest their energy. And I was sitting in the house looking at the four walls, and I said, if I don't get out of here, I'm gonna lose my mind because I'm a community oriented person. I eat energy comes to me through my interaction with community, and so I got to saying, well, if the Rona was to catch me and I knew I had 2 weeks to live, what would I regret not having done? And the answer was I hadn't taught anybody but my children how to grow food. And within 3 days, I had an offer to come to DeSoto Bass and help restart a community garden. And that got me out of the house. It allowed me to demonstrate and articulate for the community the importance of mask wearing. It put me back in contact with children and families I had served as a tutor before the Metropolitan Housing shutdown programming. And while I was there, another colleague of mine in the Dayton Africana Elders Council stopped by to see what I was doing, as we say, up in the bass. And so she stopped by and we sat amongst, we must have had 5, 6 different varieties of tomatoes. And we sat there and we were eating tomatoes off the vine. And she said, we need you at Edgemont. And I went to go look at Edgemont and realized it was the same place I had seen 3 years before that had grass growing up to the fans in the greenhouse. They had reclaimed that property. And it was almost like, the Hansel Gretel story where the witch had actually swept the sidewalk to make sure you knew how to get to the candy house, And I walked in and I learned the history of Edgemont, which was founded in 1978 by parents and grandparents of people who are now currently on the board. It was their commitment to their Southern heritage and was founded on the principles of Kwanzaa, the seven, what we call the Nguzo Saba, which includes collective work and responsibility and collective economics, and the umoja, togetherness and unity and creativity. And so, as I began to interact as a board member, this other opportunity came down the pipe. Central State Extension showed up with this concept for an incubator farm. Now, I was taught not to be afraid of much. As long as you got the right stick, you don't even have to be afraid of a snake. So when Dr. Cindy Alfred said, we'd like to consider Edgemont for our incubator farm program, I asked her how serious was she? Was she just flirting or was she actually making an engagement offer? And so we stood out in the field and did the traditional pinky promise, which don't mean much at the university level. But at the grassroots level, this means everything, right? And so I told her if the board was to accept that, would she need staff? And she said yes. And I said, well, I'd like to put my name on the list. And that's how I became the farm manager for Central State's incubator farm at Edgemont. We are in our second year there. We started off with about 20 plus students under the direction of Dana Hilfiger, who was a member of technical education staff. And Dana taught classes, and we had field days 1 day a week. People in the program had an additional 5 hours that they were supposed to give to the program. And I think the first year they thought I was the hospitality coordinator. In Appalachia, we believe in the power of food. And so every night that we had class, there was food. And so they had dinner to entice them to come on time. So when the second year came and they got to formulate themselves, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. You have a farm manager. It is I are the farm manager. And they kind of all looked and said, oh. I said, oh, did y'all think my job was to put out the snacks? So it was very interesting because I didn't realize that they didn't realize the interaction was so smooth. They didn't feel encumbered by my management style, which was a great compliment. So this year, they're a little more they recognize that I am the go-to source for their experience as they gain this independence. And yesterday was a wonderful opportunity to teach about my favorite vegetable, okra. They had some Simpson red spineless in the field and they had picked it, and it was multiple experiences. It was on the table. I put my hands on it. I looked at it and I knew what it was going to feel like when I put my hands on it because it was about that long. I'm exaggerating. It was about that long. And so farmers looked at it. a representative from Homeful came in and he made a compliment about how beautiful it looked. And all I could do was shake my head. I said, "Did you all take this to market last week?" "Yes, ma'am." "Did anybody buy it?" "Yeah." "Really?" And then one of the farmers said, "Yeah, but there was a couple of old black grandmas that put their hands on it and looked at us and just sucked their teeth." I said, "Well, that was their version of letting you know you left this in the field way too long." And then I told them, "Don't worry, the people at Homeful don't know any more about it than you do. So everything is equal opportunity learning." But we're talking about people who are in their late 20s and early 30s, whose grandparents didn't farm. And when I say farm, I don't mean tractor in a field going down Interstate 70, corn for miles. I mean a row of beans, a row of collards, a row of tomatoes, some cucumbers, and some squash. Enough that you had enough tomatoes to make enough everything else with a bushel of basket of corn from the grocery that you could make soup and have 52 jars in the cellar, one for each week, or three a week for the wintertime. So understanding that two-generation gap between understanding how to extend your dollar by growing in your own yard or coming together as a collective and growing on an empty lot in your neighborhood versus depending on industrial farming and availability of food at the grocery store. My family always leveraged that money that they were able to earn with growing food that gave us some space for things like piano lessons, vacations, and then black and white saddle Oxfords that everybody wore in the 50s, right? So coming to the city and understanding that people my age who are in their 60s had no food growing experience. They'd grown flowers, but not food. First thing that happened to me was a deep, unsettling shock. In many ways, I guess I'm very naive. I don't think I'm extra special. So I kind of figure that the experiences I've had are not necessarily extra special. So when people got to asking me, like, "What is this?" It's like, is this yellow squash the same as this zucchini? Hmm. Or how come pumpkin flowers look like squash flowers? Because pumpkin is a squash. Those are the things that I had to learn how to say with great compassion and enthusiasm, as opposed to speaking from a place of disdain and shock. So it's been a great impact on my own understanding of my role, um, and understanding that my experience with those teachers who were my parents and grandparents is a different attitude than working with people who are not your family. You have to be much more generous with people who don't know your own speaking style or management style, and you have to leave space for grace. So that's allowed us to be successful. However, that first year, them cheering suffered. They had 5 different rows individually to manage, and there were 15 of them growing on the land. It was so stressful for them that we lost 10. We kept 5. At the end of our first year evaluation, I asked Dr. Cindy Alpha and Seth Swallow, my main administrative contacts, if we could shift the style of growing. I had begged for it the first year, given the style that the solar garden was founded in, those principles of collectivity. I'd asked, can we work the group as a collective? No, this is an individual beginning farmer program. And I was like, okay, well, these people ain't never grown before, and 5 rows, 25 foot long, is a lot of management. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I doubt if this is going to be successful. But I understand you got to run your model so you can see your metrics work. And so at the end of the season, they were begging me, Mama, oh, do we have to do it like this? And I told Dr. Cindy, are people going to quit if we don't change the style? They are working full-time jobs. Many of them are parenting and parenting alone, and they don't yet have the organizational or physical capacity to do this work. They are neophytes. They're in the learning phase. Then for them, I had to say, give yourself more grace. You're new at this. We don't expect you to be expert at this at the end of 5 months growing. All you really need to do is listen and feel. Don't try to figure it out and work yourself into a tizzy. Because the wonderful thing about the Mother Earth is she don't talk back. She don't shake her finger in your face. She just loves you, receives what you give her, and does her best to bring forth something in exchange for you giving it some attention. So once they relaxed and let themselves be okay with struggle, it got easier. Because in America, we are not given permission to fail and to have a mistake as a part of a learning process. You don't learn much until you make some mistakes. I mean, you might learn that you got a great memory if you get all the answers right on a test, but until you make some errors, some faulty decisions, you really don't get an opportunity to do that self-reflection and be able to articulate, well, where is the strength in this and where is the area for development? And maybe I'm trying to do everything and when I don't need to do everything. Or maybe I'm special at this and somebody else better at that. Because one of the things that I've learned from this experience is that those of us who grew food at home tended to be intuitive growers. We were not, what's the word I want to use? Actuarially founded. We weren't keeping paperwork about when we might have put on the slip of the seed packet when it went in the ground. But we're not keeping records of how much we spent. We weren't buying no fertilizer. Fertilizer was whatever was left over that went around the plants to mulch. We didn't make compost. We just had kitchen post. Whatever it was that came out from the kitchen was what we laid in the garden and let it compost right there in the row. Um, and other animal leavings, because we would possums and raccoons and birds and other things would come and scavenge in that and then leave their own droppings. So we didn't keep statistics and financials. Maybe even didn't even weigh how much produce we generated in a year. Long as we had enough in the freezer or in the jar or in the basement or on the string in the attic, we knew intuitively how many apples we had to peel and dry to last through the winter, how many pecks of peaches we had to peel to get to the spring. Now coming to the place where we're being asked and sometimes required to do technical paperwork can be very challenging for beginners because that requires a level of refinement beyond intuition and beyond enthusiasm. I don't know, well, I do know a few people who are enthusiastic about paperwork. They also don't tend to be creatives. you know, they got their place in the world, and I'm grateful for them, and I need one. I need me an accountant, but I ain't claiming to be one. You know what I mean? I sometimes I can't keep up where my shoes are, and I just got 3 pair. So we understand that some of us are really good at planning distribution and going out and talking to people and making plans for how we're going to share the wealth, produce wealth. Some of us are better at observation, and some of us are better at encouraging other people to participate. Some of us are good teachers. Others of us don't want to do any of that stuff. We just want a basket and a harvest knife and a pair of gloves because harvesting can be like meditation. You get in a zone and you're not worried about anything except is it on the ground or is it in the basket? And that can be a real mental health opportunity to reduce one's stress and let go of trouble. I can appreciate why my ancestors sang while they worked the field. That's a level of communication with the divine, and it really is worship for me. So people have asked me since I've been here, where you go to church, which is seems to be the typical African American question for newcomers. I told them I go to the Church of Dirt. He said, where is that located? I said, 911 Miami Chapel Road, better known to some people as the Solar Garden. So that's a form of worship for me. It's
So
not been
Mama,
easy, huh?
also, I want to kind of reiterate and make a couple points on some of the stuff you just said.
Absolutely.
Um, I think it's very important to reiterate when you first came to Dayton, most people don't know if you're not from Dayton where the Soto Bass is. The Soto Bass is one of the largest public housing residential areas in Dayton.
It's the
Um,
first also.
and
It's
it's
the oldest.
also the oldest. So for you to be able to come from the outside and come in and have a garden there and motivate, right? And I think you were able to do that because you knew your legacy and you knew
Yes.
the power of collective gardening, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I think a takeaway for us in extension as a whole, not necessarily me individually, because our CED team already works from that standpoint, but just
Hmm.
as a whole, is that when you do have programming, you have to be aware of the heritage, the legacy, and recognize the learning styles of those that you are working with, right?
Absolutely.
And respect that,
Absolutely.
right? You
Yes.
can't you can't put a big circle in a small square hole,
And you
right?
and you can't make somebody swallow something that's an elephant pill.
Right. And then
They
another,
might try, and then if they choke on it and die, who's responsible for that?
yes.
So
And
it's
and and
easier. There's an old Yoruba proverb that says, "How do we eat the elephant?" And the answer is one bite at a
at a
time.
time. Yeah.
So my coming in, like I said, I'm not from Ironton. Got sidewalks and we got flush toilets, but we not a city. I tease people at Edgemont all the time, telling them the reason why y'all got such cultural deface is because y'all got more African Americans in Dayton than there are people in Ironton. They got high schools that compete against each other. They got neighborhoods who compete against each other. And that whole insular neighborhood thing that developed in Dayton was a struggle at the beginning because the sponsors wanted a certain zip code to be prevalent and on the class list. But people from the neighborhood weren't interested in that process. So they had to be willing to open their arms and receive, and it's still difficult to help them understand what the world is calling them to do.
Right.
Your neighborhood is in need, yes, but you only got 50% of the people that you grew up with and left in the neighborhood. But you got this land, which is a magnificent resource. So, for instance, like in my work with Agrarian, they're all excited about bringing kids from the city out to the country. I said, well, before you drag them all the way to Greene County, would you mind making a stop at Oasis up there at Upland and Third, and then come down to the Bass, and then shoot over to Edgemont at the Solar Garden so they can see the resources in their own community? We cannot afford to take kids, quote, out of town, which reinforces you got to leave home to be somebody. You got to leave home to be successful. No, we need you to be home. We need you to be successful right here. And so part of my new work is going to be reaching out and developing programming that will reach down to third graders and follow them until they are eligible to make decisions about what they want to do for their career path, and encourage them to see agriculture as an African American heritage art form and a rightful legacy. that there is no shame in having dirt up underneath your nails. Everybody don't need a corner office with a view because we all have to eat. And one of those other adinkra symbols that shows two alligators crossed like this, their heads going in the same direction and their tails at the bottom, translates to we're all joined at the belly. We can
Yes.
argue about politics, but eventually we're going to all have to eat. And the way that we're going to have more food sovereignty is not by increasing industrial farming, it's by more of us growing what we eat. There is no greater pleasure than opening up your patio door in your apartment building, stepping out onto your patio where you done remove 3 courses of brick so you can get about 8-12 inches of growing space and pick your own bell pepper and your own greens and bring them and put them in your own pot. You didn't even have to turn on your car to go get anything. So as we look at how we can reduce carbon from fuel emissions, hey, let's grow more food so we don't have to go to the grocery store as often. What can we do? Well, we can put some of the stuff in the ground. It'll suck up some carbon dioxide and put some oxygen out. That's what we can do. We all don't have to be millionaires. We all don't have to be Jeff Bezos and that crowd to be able to affect environmental change and increase food sovereignty. We just have to create for some and increase for others our own responsibility for how we are going to get our food. And it doesn't take much to grow a tomato in a 5-gallon bucket. Collard greens tolerate 100-degree heat and 45-degree cold. There's nothing wrong with being able to grow food. I'm looking forward to when we decide we don't need front yards, that we need front gardens. That'll make me happy. So it's about not getting the next generation, the next 3 generations. Because if I can work with 40, 60-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and children, then maybe we can make a serious dent in this urban food insecurity thing. Must be time for me to stop, but I'm run out of air.
So, um, keeping with this, your legacy of collective growing, right?
Mhm.
Um, and you basically laid out a framework of connecting resources such as Central State, University Extension, Agraria, um, and and also as Eric is very versed in the asset-based community development model, which is focused on communities seeing and realizing their internal assets and building upon that and
Mhm.
maintaining ownership of their communities, right?
Yes.
So you're combining all of that. And I'm glad that, you were a fellow at Agraria. And I'm glad that once again, even though you may have been learning some things from them, they're learning from you. They're learning how to engage the next generations
Ah,
in a sustainable way, and you are breaking that two generational curse, right? Of
I'm
lack of
doing my
knowledge
best to
and
be the
access.
bridge.
Yes, and so you are
Yes.
bridging on
Well,
that. So
I
I want to
have
say thank you.
I'm so grateful for this opportunity for the third act. And I commend Susan Jennings at Agraria for creating the Regenerative Farming Fellowship and the work they're doing with the Black Farming Network and their participation with the Black Farming Conference. I get the honor of interviewing Michael Twitty, who will be the guest speaker. I saw him on PBS when he was an interpreter at Williamsburg. So I'm familiar with his work. I'm looking forward to reading The Cooking Gene. Um, and then also having grown up with my kids in Jewish daycare, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him about his favorite recipe for challah, for bread, for egg bread. I'm so excited about that. And comparing some of the things that we ate, because Ironton was a very eclectic community. We had people from Lebanon, we had people from, well, what existed then as Hungary and Czechoslovakia. So I grew up eating European foods that I knew were ethnic, but they were also affordable. So there's a lot to be gained, and there's much to do, because the next step after growing food is learning how to preserve it, and then also learning how to cook it, because we got kids who think that dinner only comes from McDonald's. You know, and I ain't
Yeah,
trying to
and that,
curse no dispersions. I don't want them after me because I'm trying to be a downer on hamburgers. That is not my plan. But one fry is one fry, but a biggie fry, it's 14,000 fried calories too many. And that's me myself. We're all Americans. We've all been trained to want to satisfy our tongue. So that's life. But we'll make it through, and hopefully we'll be part of the solution. That's the goal.
and I know Gordon Reed is on here. I'm not used to him being so quiet, so I'm going to call him out to come to chime in over these last 15 minutes. This time on in, Gordon, because he's doing some great things as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience at Agraria and how you feel that will assist you in your future endeavors?
Yes, I after the experience as a fellow, I was asked to serve as their first artist in residence, and to take an opportunity to use more of the storytelling for land connection and creative writing, as the opportunity to be on the land and do some reflective writing. So while I was doing that, I also came upon a couple of opportunities through the Ohio Art Council for Agraria to do some programming in resilience, and looking at how the inclusion of the arts on the land can draw more people to the land, because Agraria is working on a bioregional concept, and I have a deep interest in spiritual ecology that matches their land use strategy. So we're looking at being able to provide um, support for adolescents as they create their own worldview. We're looking at being able to bring adolescents and teenagers and young adults on the land to create opportunities for them to reduce their stress and find support, in support of our own and all of our mental health issues as we go through these tumultuous times. So I get to use my past experience in curriculum design, because I'm working on this pathway program that would take third graders all the way through to the 12th grade, that would be vocabulary rich and technologically sound. So by the time they get to be sophomores, if they want to make a decision about agriculture as a career, there would be multiple streams for them to seek academic, moral, and financial support to make those things a reality. I've
Hmm.
crossed the number 70 now. So when you get to this place, you know, uh, you're not climbing to get to the mountaintop. You're kind of standing up there going, whew, I made it up here. Okay. And then you survey and you think, what is the legacy you're going to leave behind? Did you leave a trail on how to get up the hill? Are you standing on top of the hill making an announcement that everybody can hear? So I'm hopefully left a trail broad enough for somebody to follow. And I'm now shouting from the mountaintop where the trail is, the necessity to get on the trail, so that when I leave this physical form, that the legacy that's left behind is inspired, as we would say, 7 generations is what indigenous people claim, that we would impact at least 7 generations. And maybe I am the fourth, and maybe there's 3 more behind me that is the impact of what my great grandfather asked for. But I see myself in a line of people. I'm not the beginning, and I'm hoping I'm not the end of the string of people who have understood how to coax the earth into sustaining us, and what food does to create community. You can't have a family meeting without some food. Even if it's just a can of peanuts, you got to have
Gotta
some
have something.
food,
Yes.
you know.
And
So
Gordon, is there something you wanted to add? Because I see you turned your mic on.
I was having a problem getting the mic and the video on, but basically, what we look at is the loss of the connection of people with the land, and you don't automatically go back to that connection
so
without
true.
putting some time and work in. And somebody's like, well, how much time are we talking about? You're talking about 10 to 50 years in order to reestablish that connection with the land. And the thing is, concrete is not land.
No, it's not.
You have to have the land up under you in order to look at where you're going, because that's where you came from. There's an associate of mine, he's a PhD, started out in country Mississippi,
Mm,
and he's got some land. He went back and he tried to instill big city lifestyles in that slow country environment, and it nearly killed him.
mm.
He tried to apply what he's been doing the last 30 years to the time that he was going to be in Mississippi. And
Didn't.
to his surprise and to his dismay, it beat him to death. He was so humble and so sorry that he had tried to apply the big city lifestyle. I said, it doesn't work here. I said, although this is your home where you started out, although this is where your family is, you've been gone so long, you're no longer
Yeah.
part of it, you're an outsider. And
Mm,
rather than
mm.
try to instill what you use today on them, you need to step back and listen to what they're saying and follow what it is they're doing. And
I
all
say,
that,
Brother Gordon.
okay, and all that work and money that you spent, you still have to wait on the local boys to help you out. And that's the part of the equation that too many times gets forgotten. And it's like, you don't live here anymore.
Right.
You are no longer a part. You are a family member, but you are not part of this family at this time. You've got to re-educate and rebirth yourself at the level from which you started.
Absolutely. And the thing that I'm also acutely aware of is that we have to work from both ends. You
Correct.
can't lecture children. You have to feed their mouths and their ears at the same time. So I remember fondly years ago, I was working in Cincinnati in a mixed Appalachian community, and we had a garden, and the children were earning their summer pay by tending it. They were whining at 9 o'clock in the morning about how hard the work was. And I told them, look, all of y'all's ancestors picked tobacco and cotton, so let's
Hmm.
get busy. And
Hmm.
so we finally grew, and the broccoli had heads on it, and we had a tasting session. And one little boy said, this tastes like real broccoli. And I said, baby, this is the realest broccoli you will ever
Right.
eat. So
That's right.
being able to get them to understand what it tastes like, how good it is for their body, and also at the same time, because this generation is motivated by money, teaching them that this can sustain their material desire if they understand how food works in the body and in the market, so that we won't be ashamed of farming. We have to teach African American children in specific that Africans were kidnapped because of their brilliant knowledge about agriculture, metalworking, and animal husbandry. They
Right.
were not kidnapped because they were dumb, stupid, and slow. They were, and for those of us who believe in a greater cause, perhaps we were brought here for this very time and this very moment. Perhaps we got a special little stone in our pocket We supposed to rub when we all get the universal message, and we'll all transform into mighty mice, and we will save the world. I don't know, but I know that there is no such thing in my life as coincidence, and I also know elders are held responsible for cultural transmission. So, Brother Reed, everything you said is right on, right on. And my whole issue being here in Dayton is I wasn't born here, and I didn't grow up here, and I didn't go to high school with anybody here. And so I had to learn, just like I did as a child, how to sit in the corner and be quiet and listen until I was invited into the conversation. And I give all the praise to my ancestors who taught me them social tricks so that I could find a way to be received and valued as a member of the Dayton growing community.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope to see you at the conference being sponsored by Antioch. I'll make sure Miss Amber has the flyer.
Yes. You know
She
what
can
we
share
Is
it with
that
everybody.
the grain conference?
Actually,
Is
grain
that the grain
school.
conference?
No, grain school is this month. The farming conference is next month. It's sponsored by
Okay.
Antioch University.
Okay, you've got to keep me. I've got about 6 conferences between now and the end of October. So
You must
you
be
have
a
to keep me
young you
straight.
must be a young man to be so busy.
I'm probably older than you.
Well, I'm willing to have a throwdown contest if you want to.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Might give up some secrets I've held for a while.
Well, it's people our age who have to make the difference here. Those of us who have been invested with the knowledge, it's our responsibility. So
Correct.
you doing your work. Thank you very much. So everybody, it's 7 minutes till 3. Anybody have a specific question that they would like to or comment they want to throw out?
I do.
Okay.
Hey, Mama. Oh, it's Crystal. One, thank you so much for. Hopefully, you can hear me.
I
It's a
can.
storm rolling through, and so my power's flickering. That's why my
Yeah,
camera
it's here
was off
too.
for a minute.
Mhm.
Yeah. I wanted to just say one thank you because the information and just the stories that you share hit home for me. Being someone who has my great grandmother was actually from the Carolinas, and she was what I found. Aunt just told me she was a town medicine woman, so
Yes.
she grew a lot of the herbs. And growing up with a garden, and it was my grandmother who had the garden. I understand the connection between being that individual who needs to learn how to work the land again, and I love that. So
that herbal stuff I got from my grandfather is what sustained my family and my children. We had no health insurance.
Yes.
And I had an asthmatic child. We had to figure it out. So I thank you for your commitment. We needed to have some chat, me and you.
Yes, ma'am. I am actually
something-
interested. Let's do
Yeah.
this. One of
That's
the
the thing we're
questions.
bringing to Agraria is medicine, herbal medicine. So you had a
Awesome.
question? Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So I wanted to kind of tie it back into where you were speaking on food sovereignty. And right now, just looking at the world and how things are with just, as we know, supply chain shortages and the lack of fresh produce in the stores, or just it not being in the reach of those in our communities, right? And how the Edgemont Solar Garden is so vitally important for our sustainability in the communities. What do you think are some staple crops or staple foods that anyone should be able or should be growing right now and continue to grow amidst this particular food crisis and just for their own sustainability?
For all people, anything that's going to give you the essential building block minerals, iron, calcium, and for those of us with weight issues that have created hypertension through our own eating our own stress, manganese, magnesium, and potassium. So the crux comes, where is the cost break? I would suggest people grow onions if they want to eat them fresh. Don't grow onions to try to store. You can't beat the grocery store price on a bag of dried onions, right? But all summer long when they're fresh, you don't have to buy none at the grocery store. I would also recommend any leafy green vegetable, the collard, the cabbage, mustards, turnips, spinach. All of those are filled with phytonutrients plus fiber to keep our colons clean so that we can not be susceptible to colorectal cancer. Then, the one I should have said is the one that all of us are remiss in. We need to drink more water, more water, more water, more water. And that does not include liquid that has sugar in it. So pop don't count. Them other fizzy things that don't count. Coffee kind of counts as long as you don't put too much sugar in it and no cream in your coffee. Not that dairy is bad for us, but hard cheeses are better for us than soft cheeses because cheese does help the gut biome, but many of us who have African ancestry also don't have the enzyme required to break down cow milk. We can do goat and we can do sheep, but we don't do cow milk very well. So leafy green vegetables, things that are easy to grow, like garlic and carrots, or even potatoes. You can take an old potato with the eye sprouts and just cut it with the sprouts. Get I would do it in a 30 or 50 gallon garbage can. Plant them 1/4 of the way down so that you got all that dirt underneath. And in 3 to 4 months, you'll have a garbage can full of potatoes. So that would be a thing that one could do to, supplement. Because then the thing is, how much food did you grow and what space do you have to store it and what method do you have to store it? So for like potatoes, they have to be in a cool, dark place. And my dad's family dug a hole and made a ground cellar for their hard squashes, butternut, Hubbard, potatoes, and things like that. Growing beets. Beets are filled with iron. You can eat the tops, and they can stay in the ground until nearly Christmas. If the ground don't freeze, they can overwinter. Collard greens overwinter. They grow. They don't bloom, so they don't need a lot of sunlight to flower and to create fruit like a squash or a watermelon or a tomato vine. But yellow crookneck squash for breakfast is delicious. Yellow crookneck squash in a casserole for dinner is delicious, and that's one of my family heritage crops. We ate squash for breakfast. We ate okra for breakfast. Okra scrambled with eggs. Oh my goodness! So I always suggest that people grow some okra, if for nothing else but to watch the flower. It's kin to the hibiscus family, and the flower that comes is so beautiful, and the insects love it, and then it closes up and becomes the pod of okra that we then eat. So I like to eat it and think that I'm eating flowers because it is like eating flowers. And it's beautiful to watch grow. Sometimes though it get a little taller than I am. It can get 6 to 8 feet. So you might need somebody to come harvest if you're only 5 or 5'2". But it is a beautiful crop to grow. And it's something that, it links us straight back to the African continent. And so it's kind of like an honorific plant for me. Mm-hmm. So those are the things. And hey, and if you got a sunny spot in the summer, grow all the tomatoes that you can, put them up and, jar them up, make soup, and so that you can have fresh food in the middle of winter. One of my most favorite, fondest memories too, going to the cemetery with my mother to forage. There were black walnut trees there. She said the squirrels didn't eat all of them. And she would go up and we'd knock off the shells and let them rot the way you have to. And then she'd make black walnut fudge as Christmas gifts. And then eating fresh peach pie because she'd buy peaches. And after she got a deep freezer, we froze and we didn't do so much canning, so it wasn't as hot work. But we always have fresh peach pie on New Year's Day. So, those are some of the traditions I hope to be able to sustain for myself.
And Eric, can you put a comment in the chat? Can you read that comment
Oh, I was just
or
reminded
speak
that,
on it?
yeah, just First, deep appreciation, Mama O, such sage wisdom and advice. Um, you know, I take from you both the wisdom and the spirit that you bring here, and I just appreciate it. One thing you mentioned was that seventh generation uh, quote, and so I just dropped in where that came from, was all it was. Um, so the came from the Iroquois Confederacy,
Yes.
where the Native Americans said, in our every deliberation, we must consider the impact of our decisions in the next seven generations. And just that's
And
powerful.
the pan cultural movement across the United States that includes all indigenous nations, they've taken that on as a national standard, you know. But the Iroquois Nation is just not upstate New York. Everybody who was speaking any of those variants of the language, so it went from upstate New York all the way down to the Potomac Valley and back over to the mountains. So that's a lot of influence. But and then Chief Seattle's statement, you know, we are, she's the mother and we are the children. I'm paraphrasing, but you know, we have a responsibility to take care of the mother. That's our job. We are her children.
Gordon, did you have any comments?
The only thing that you forgot in the food was sweet potatoes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the American yam. That's right.
Yeah.
Although, you know, I don't know too many people who have tried and or been successful in doing so. So that's a thing that we really need to make a comeback with.
And tried and sweet. You mean as far as growing sweet potatoes?
Yes, sir.
Oh yeah, I do almost every year, and I don't even eat them.
And do you also grow peanuts?
Not for a long time. I used to, but not for a long time. Maybe 30, 40 years since I grew peanuts.
I've been talking with people about that, growing crops that don't need a lot of maintenance on marginal land that they can't get to regularly, that those kinds of crops would include potatoes, sweet potatoes, peanuts. Hmm.
Yeah, that would work excellently. The only
Thank
thing
you.
about the peanuts is a long season.
Yeah, that's why I say you need a field that you don't need to put nothing else in.
Right.
Hmm.
That's all I got there.
Okay, and Miss Rhonda, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Oh no, I've just enjoyed the presentation.
Hi, Rhonda.
I'm okay.
You lurking. I can't see everybody who's on the call.
Oh yeah, she was the first
I'm
person
just
who
a
logged
listener.
in.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any other comments or anything? Okay, well, Mama O, as we close out, thank you as always. You're always dropping gems, always dropping wisdom, inspiring. I think you have identified among us on our team anyway, who observes, who motivates, who's the harvester, and I mean that figuratively as
Yeah.
well as physically. And just thank you for always pouring into us.
As we
And
go out, I want to make a statement here.
I'm
I
gonna let you
want
close out. I'm gonna
I
let you
want
close out.
everybody to come to Edgemont Solar Garden on September 17th and participate in our Fall Fest. It's going to be a wonderful time. We should have some good food and some good music. And then keep your ear to the ground for the emerging educational collaboration with Dayton Public Schools and Miami Valley Meals. That's all I'm going to say, just a little teaser. So stay tuned for great things coming out of Edgemont.
Well, definitely. And as always, soon as you get us the flyers, we will help get the information out. It's no problem. And you know I'll be up there because
Yes.
last year, I got my greens and I got red onions, I got garlic. The leaves I learned that
Yes,
you can
yeah.
use that like the garlic if the garlic isn't ready. And it did work. And I have my butter something squash. I mean lettuce. What is it? Butter bib lettuce?
Butter
Chris,
leaf.
But yeah,
Butterleaf.
I always mess it up, but it's good. And I had smoothies and kale that wasn't bitter, and
Ah,
yeah, so yeah, I had bought a whole lot of stuff. I was a cooking sister that week. Um, but just want to thank you again for sharing the information, Gordon. Thank you for joining us. And like Crystal, I'm part of that 2 generations off. Like my grandfather had a big garden in the back, and he made stuff for everybody. My grandmother
mhm,
can, all kind of stuff.
mhm.
And I haven't gardened since then. So I've been talking with Crystal, like, I need to start doing this, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I live in my grandparents' house, so I know exactly where the garden needs to go, where it gets the most sun. I already sent her pictures. This is where it's gonna go,
That's right.
and so that we can break that 2 generation gap, and that knowledge and reconnection to the land, in the city. So,
Yeah.
um, thank you for giving us your tips and nuggets on how you are going to expand the urban farming, throughout Ohio, and how it can be duplicated. And just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
So
you all for
just
the opportunity to address the public.
anytime, we're gonna bring you back.
Oh, thank you.
So once again, this concludes this segment of CED Office Hour Live, where we talk about all things CED, this, that, and the other. And today's topic was the expansion of urban farming in Ohio. And next week we will be focusing in on the ecological system, basically from farm to the retailers to table, right? And looking at the entrepreneurship and the connectivity from what you're growing, and working with small markets in the neighborhood, so you're keeping it recycling the businesses and supporting businesses in the neighborhood. Pastor Gene Ellington, who is the executive director of a community development corp here in Cincinnati, Ohio, will be our featured speaker. And we have good things coming on as we continue this conversation on urban farming in Ohio. So thank you, and you all have a good afternoon.